Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what do you think? I think often, like, when we talk about crits, from all the way from the bottom and then into the pros, I think a lot of people talk about, oh, crashes happen because people are inexperienced.
Mm,
And, from doing the EDRs, which is, for people not familiar, which is, it's an amateur draft legal race for people trying to become professional triathletes. There's only a few of them. I know I was definitely inexperienced going into that, and we had to do the clinic on learning how to, cycle through and doing all these things. But I've had other people suggest that, you know, inexperience isn't the issue. What do you think causes all the crashes in crits? Like, what makes it so dangerous?
yeah, I've definitely heard that hypothesis as well. Disagree with that because I think you see these crashes happen at all levels. I think what happens is that as you get more and more and more experienced, as you go from Cat 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 to Pro, you've gone around more corners, you've raced in more pelotons, you are a better bike handler, and you're more confident. And those things, almost like the confidence and the skills, almost just get equalized by the more risk that you're taking. So it's like, if you're I think that the frequency of crashes continues to be pretty high because people are more confident in their bike handling skills and more comfortable in a pack, and so they're just like getting closer to each other and taking more risks. um, and as evidenced by the guys in the Tour de France, like how many of them make it 180 start, right? And by the end of the 3 weeks, how many are taken out by crashes? Like a third? That's a
Hmm.
pretty high rate for the people who are the best bike handlers in the world.
Right, and it's always it's not even like just the I just forgot the word. It's not the guys that are, it's the GC contenders. It's not just
Not the
like,
monastiques, yeah.
yeah. I was like, why did I forget the word? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's the top contenders get taken out every single year. And so I think, right, for that's my understanding, is that as you become more and more skilled, you're going faster, you take more risks, and your comfort gets the best of you. And you're racing more as well, I think. So it heightens the risks. And I think at the lower levels, the crashes, and in do happen because of kind of poor handling and inexperience, but the kind of rate ends up being the same, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's like almost just like an over exuberance, or what's the word? Brashness almost.
yeah, something like that. And I think not, maybe not even, yeah, I think there's some element of that, but just the nature of, uh, let's say, 50 to 100 people in close proximity on tiny wheels going 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. Like, it's
Hmm.
something, and there being imperfections in the road and imperfections in someone's attention, and it's just gonna happen. And it's so many times I've crashed when I was bike racing. I did this tour, Nature Valley Grand Prix. It was like a 7-day stage race, with like some of the best cyclists in the world. And I crashed 4 times in one race, 4 times. And none of them were my fault, or none of them were an error that I had made. Um,
Right.
Maybe once I sort of overcooked a turn, but it was big. I fell because somebody in front of me fell and I hit them. So it's like,
Hmm.
that's what you're eliminating mostly in triathlon. Like, in the circumstance of your crash or others I've seen where people kind of get jumbled up with one another, that can happen. But because of the nature of non-drafting, it was more spread out. And even in ITU, it just seems like people are a little bit, well, they're spread out a little bit more by the swim, which helps. And then I think there's just the culture of the racing is just a little more safe, it seems like. So you're getting fewer, super dangerous crashes, from my understanding.
Right. I mean, with the ITU, it almost seems like um, you definitely have everybody trying to get together in a peloton, or the breakaways, but it's almost at the same time, like some of the girls or guys, I guess, know, okay, if I'm back a minute, like I'm the best runner in the field, like I
Sure.
still have time the finish line of the bike is not the finish line.
Yeah,
So
true.
it's like there's a little bit of more whole race, like holistic methodology instead of just the line's a line. We got to risk everything to make it there by the end of the bike.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The mentality is like the shift is a little bit different for the ITU. It's just one leg.
So I'm going to go down a different direction just because this is a personal curiosity. So if you're watching this conversation, you just have to come along for the ride. So I'm curious about your time in France. If you watched the tour, what took you to France, and kind of that period of your life before you've gotten here?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I'd always been a Francophile, you could say, ever since I started taking French in middle school. I just loved the culture and the food and the art and the history. I thought it was fascinating. And so I did an exchange there when I was 14, and I lived with a family in Normandy for a month, and that kind of planted the seed. And I kept
Okay.
in touch with girl Marion. And then, yeah, I always knew that either I wanted to study abroad there in college or go and live there after college. And I ended up deciding not to do the semester abroad because I really loved my college experience, and I couldn't imagine like taking a semester away from being on that campus I loved up at Williams. So I thought, well, why not have my cake and eat it too? And I can just go live there for a year after college. And I went to the fellowships office at school and said, what can I do to live in France for a year? And they found me this French government teaching fellowship. You didn't really need to have too much teaching experience, but you,
Hmm.
as long as you were game and spoke French pretty well and were willing to teach like elementary schoolers English, then that was the requirements. And so I ended up doing that, and got placed in a rural part of France called Lorraine province,
Hmm.
in a small town. A very small town of 3,000 people was where my school was, but I was given the good advice to live in the slightly bigger town that was adjacent, which is called Verdun, which people might know for the battle in World War I, where like a million
Hmm.
people were. It was like the French border, front. So yeah, I loved it. It was a real blessing in disguise to be in such a rural area, because I made friends who were just so like open to meeting an American and teaching me about their culture and taking me kind of under their wing. And I got to do a lot of traveling throughout the country and rode. That's where I really discovered how much I love to ride bikes, and such a great place to do it there. All the drivers are very respectful. So
Hmm.
yeah.
So, this is something I'm always curious about because, like, si je peux me souvenir suffisamment de mes français, j'ai passé une année d'apprendre la langue avec un enseignant sur Skype.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so I'll back to English, but like, so I spent a year like on Skype with a lady from Quebec because I love Montreal, so I decided to learn French because of that. But like my level sucks, and I always feel like a lot of people that just learned the language in high school didn't get a chance to practice it. So I'm like, how was your high school experience or like school experience learning French like good enough to get you to the point where they're like, yeah, like your French is great. Like, come over and teach English.
Oh man. I've always been like a languages person for sure. I took Latin as well. It sort of helped solidify the French. But I think also I'm pretty okay with like your French sounds great enough to me. I think if part of it's like
Well, thanks. I feel like I need to practice a lot more. I'm like, it's.
yeah. I'm freezing. Yeah. So I think part of my secret is that I'm pretty confident, and I just like start talking and it just comes. Um, and so yeah, not afraid, even if I have to like talk my way around something because I don't know
Uh-huh.
the right vocab words. And then I think keep like you're saying, practice is huge. I practice like any chance I can get. And I have. I remember after I'd done that exchange in ninth grade, and my French was pretty good after coming home from a month of it, living
Hmm.
with this family who didn't speak much English. And I would like speak to tourists in the on the street that I saw to try to keep it up. I write letters to my pen pal, and even now, like in the hospital, if I see a patient who is from like Ivory Coast or Senegal or Haiti, or I try to speak to them in French, and I say, "Oh, I'll go interview that patient because I speak French." Kind of keep it up. And we have my fiance also speaks French, so we kind of
well, that's super convenient.
yeah, not that we speak it to each other really that much, but we do have when he was studying abroad there, he made a friend in Paris who now lives in New York, so we have them over often, and so that kind of helps too. But yeah, I think practice is certainly the key, and then trying to we go to France, like, I've been a couple times since then, so that helps too, to kind of reinvigorate your skills. And movies.
Yeah, yeah. It's always like my difficulty is always trying to find something that's like the correct level, because I mean it's easy enough to pick up a French movie, but then it's like, okay, a lot of this vocabulary and the speed is well beyond my listening abilities.
Yeah,
So
true.
that's that's some of the like difficulty.
Yeah, that is tough.
What was I've got a fair number of other questions I guess I can ask you. So something I'm curious about is like, with all the traveling, like between med school and traveling for racing and all that kind of stuff, like I know most people have a kind of stress related to travel, even if you're just sitting on a plane. It's like, do you have any strategies, or like, do you have any like tips, I guess, on how to deal with like, getting ready to go race and then coming back and like fitting all that in without just being burnt?
Yeah. Like, have a packing list. Um, use the same like bags if you can, and put things in the same places. Just like having routine, I think, helps a lot. I do like when I use my bike box, I like pack it in the same way and put things in like the same places. I think that helps. As far as the traveling itself, yeah, I guess I'm not super stressed out about it. I find it like it's sort of reserved time when you're on the plane to like take care of things you didn't have a chance to do when you were back home. I kind of like or read when you're like have this protected time, which is nice. But yeah, I think, yeah, control all the things that make it routine as much as you can. No, fly from the same airports over and over. I got like so good at renting cars from Atlanta because I raced in Augusta and Chattanooga, and I was like, the rental car places, this is not stressful because I know where the bus to get the rental car places. I know where the gas station is. As much as you can make your life easier because of those like routines, I think that's makes it a whole lot less stressful. And like bringing your own food, always knowing where the water fountains are, making sure you fill up, stuff like that. Making as much, keeping things normal for you. And yeah, I mean, of course, sometimes your flight gets delayed and you don't get in until 3 a.m. and you have to go to class the next day at 8. That happens, but you kind of have to. Those are the times when you take the $60 cab to get home quick. So you kind of have to parse it out.
Yeah, kind of like Atlanta for you. Philadelphia is like, a lot of times I'm racing, if I'm headed out somewhere, somehow I end up being routed through Philadelphia. So I'm like that's my airport. Like I know where the food court is. Like I know which wing I need to go to.
There you go.
So it's like that's something that's planned. Yeah, but the plan is like big. At least for me, keeping the stress down. Like, all right, before I get on the plane, like I've got my compression socks on, and like I've got to fill my water bottle up, and I've got everything I need, and doing that checklist. I don't want to bounce back because I don't want to miss this. I have like such a hodgepodge of questions for you because that's the nature of like smart athletes. They do a little bit of everything. But I want to talk about I think you did. You're the lead researcher for concussion research. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. I've done a bunch of concussion research. Yeah. And I worked with mostly a neurologist who does, that's one of his like primary areas of research, and then sort of a team of sports medicine providers who were kind of team physicians as well. So I had a couple projects that I worked on, both like epidemiology, kind of characterizing the sports related concussions that happen among athletes at Columbia, where I'm a student, sort of Ivy League D1 program. And then there was an MRI study we did, like uh, having athletes undergo brain scans after their concussion to try to look at minor changes that go on. And yeah, another study I did looking at the rates of like orthopedic or musculoskeletal injury that happen like in the period following concussion, and see if there's some hypothesis there that your balance and coordination might be off, or you're kind of not fully recovered and more prone to getting other injuries. So yeah, that was what I did in those 2 years where I took extra time in med school. So
Okay, so the last one was you're basically trying to figure out whether these other correlation or causation. I guess really correlation because you can't necessarily prove the causation at that point. Um, we all know that's a that's a no-no with research. So it's trying to prove the correlation between like a higher risk of musculoskeletal injury in people with concussions.
Yeah, that's right. There's of course we don't know that much about what actually happens during a concussion. We know that it's a brain injury, but we really don't know a good way to measure whether it's happened or not, whether that's by an image or a blood test or whatever. We don't have a good diagnostic tool. So really right now it's like a clinical diagnosis. Like, oh, did you um, have a headache and you have dizziness, so you probably have a concussion. So I think researchers are yearning to find other ways to characterize concussion. And one sort of hypothesis is that, man, when these athletes are returning to play, it seems like they're getting hurt more than they would otherwise, and not have the concussion. And is there really a link there? So that was like what we were trying to look at. And it does seem like there is some link there, but we don't know. We don't know what's causing that. Is it because the kids who are getting concussion are also more likely to get an injury because they're injury prone in general? That's possible too.
Right.
Control for that, but yeah, it's a really fascinating disease, and really we know so little, and so there's a lot of room for breakthroughs in the field.
Well, there's like, I mean, it seems like almost a hyper focus on it now, for good reasons. Um, so I'm kind of curious. Do you know anything about like so I watch a lot of soccer. I mean, you played soccer. I don't know how much you actually still watch.
Yeah, a little bit.
But there's the concussion protocol that like the trainers come out and check if there's a head injury, and there's like they run the athlete through some kind of protocol. I mean, I don't know what it is. Do you know anything about that? If there's such a hard time like actually diagnosing that, like, do you know anything about what they're doing, or what kind of reliability that has?
Yeah, so I think what they're probably doing is what's called a SCAT, and it's like the sideline concussion assessment tool, SCAT.
Okay.
And it comes is like a little card that you can have and whip it out, and you ask all these different questions. There's like a set of questions called the Maddox questions that ask you, who's the opponent we're playing, what position are you, what happened in the last play, and it's kind of to see how good your recent memory is, because that can be a common cause, a common symptom of concussion. And there's also like a checklist of different symptoms you might be feeling. So it asks you, do you have any current right now? Do you have headache, nausea? Did you vomit? Do you have tingling sensation? All these symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And it asks you to repeat numbers after the examiner has said them. So it says, please, repeat after me: 94028. And then after that, it's 94028. And if you can't do them, you get minus points. And it does have some validity in serving as a diagnostic tool for concussion. So if you have a low stat score, it is a high likelihood that you have a concussion, and they typically pull you out of the play. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this done. I mentioned I was considering sports medicine, and so I shadowed team physicians on the sidelines of football games mostly, and saw this done. And I think it it is a tool. I think it helps the provider, the doctor usually, or the athletic trainer, to give some quantitative measure to what they're seeing in the athlete. I think often what you see is that the provider knows what they want to do. They know, okay, this kid has a concussion. We just need to but if we show him he scored 27 out of 50, he's gonna be more likely to be amenable to being pulled from the game. And I think
Right, instead of just making a gut check call, or what seems like a gut check call.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there are a couple of tools like that are really useful, and more to come. I think people would love to have some sort of sweat test or blood test or something you could do on the spot. But I think we're pretty far from that at this point, or at least some sort of quick, easy. If you can't touch your finger to your nose and to your toe or something.
Yeah.
But I think it's complicated and nuanced, and we're not quite there.
Okay, so I'll give you this one last question. This is a question I ask everybody because it's so varied. It's always good to get different responses. But if you could only eat one thing for recovery for the rest of your life, what do you choose?
Ooh. That's pretty easy actually for me. So I love to make my own pancakes, and my fiance calls them CC cakes because they're not really there's no recipe. I put
Okay.
whatever I want in them. Depending on if I'm making them for someone else, I might kind of modify, but yeah, so, and I love to eat that. After I come back from a big swim or whatever and run in the morning, I always make pancakes and eggs, real Vermont maple syrup. So definitely CC cakes would be, yeah.
So what, I mean, what makes them different, I guess? What
Yeah, I throw in there. Okay, so depends on the mood I'm feeling, but often
okay.
this special, well, I'll always put usually whole wheat flour, and then but sometimes I'll throw in some have this like vanilla protein powder I put in there. It tastes really good. You can
Mm-hmm.
protein pancake. Sometimes I'll put in wheat bran or and I'll put in nuts and raisins, sometimes vanilla extract, sometimes almond extract, which most people think is disgusting, but I love it. And yeah, nuts, berries, you name it, I can throw it in there. So
So it's just basically whatever you want is the
whatever I want.
essence of it.
Yeah, whatever I want. Anything that it turns out, as long as you put some sort of flour ish, it doesn't need to be all flour, but some flour, some leavening, baking powder or something,
Mhm.
and then egg and either yogurt or milk. It turns into basically a pancakey form. It's if you think sometimes they'd come out totally flat or not, just cardboard or something, but that never happens. It's kind of magic.
I'll have to try that out. I don't know that I'm quite as impromptu as that because although I guess I wish I could be.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like you said earlier, you just gotta dive in
Yeah, just dive
and
in.
do
Just start throwing stuff
it.
in.
So, Cecilia, if people want to follow you, get in touch with you, kind of see what kind of antics you're up to, where
Yeah.
should they go?
Yeah, for sure. I am not the best at my social media, I have to admit. I sort of blame that on my other busy life. It's not
Fair
totally
enough.
a great excuse, but no, I do have a website. It's my name, CeciliaDavisHayes.com. Update that with some regularity, and then I've got an Instagram also, Cecilia Davis Hayes, which I post race photos and stuff and results on. So, yeah, check me out there.
Sounds great. Thanks for coming on today, Cecilia.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to speak with you. Bye bye.